In the highlands of northern Ethiopia on the first day of March in 1896, something happened that would shake the foundations of European colonialism and rewrite the story of African resistance forever. The Battle of Adwa was not just a military confrontation. It was a defining moment in world history, a clash between an African kingdom and a European imperial power that ended in a way almost no one in the Western world had anticipated. To understand why this battle mattered so deeply, we need to go back to the forces that made it inevitable. By the late 19th century, European powers were carving up the African continent at a breathtaking pace. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 had essentially divided Africa among European nations without a single African voice in the room. Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, and Portugal were all staking their claims. Italy, a relatively young nation eager to prove itself on the world stage, set its sights on the Horn of Africa. It had already established a foothold in Eritrea and Somalia, and now it wanted Ethiopia, one of the last remaining independent African kingdoms. The tension between Italy and Ethiopia came to a head through a deeply controversial document known as the Treaty of Wuchale, signed in 1889. Emperor Menelik II of Ethiopia signed this treaty, believing it established a friendly relationship between the two nations. However, the Italian version of the treaty contained a critical difference. While the Amharic version stated that Ethiopia could use Italy as an intermediary for foreign affairs if it chose to, the Italian version stated that Ethiopia was obligated to do so, effectively making Ethiopia an Italian protectorate. When Menelik discovered this deception, he rejected the Italian interpretation entirely and renounced the treaty in 1893. Italy refused to back down, and war became unavoidable. Menelik began preparing for the conflict with remarkable strategic foresight. He stockpiled weapons, secured ammunition from France and Russia, and rallied his people with a powerful proclamation calling on every Ethiopian to defend their homeland. His wife, Empress Taytu Betul, was not merely a figurehead. She was a fierce political and military leader who played a central role in mobilizing forces and sustaining the war effort. Together, they assembled one of the largest African armies of the era, estimated at around 100,000 soldiers. The Italian commander, General Oreste Baratieri, led a force of approximately 17,000 soldiers, a combination of Italian troops and Eritrean colonial soldiers known as askari. Confident in European military superiority and armed with modern weapons, Baratieri advanced into Ethiopian territory. However, he was operating on faulty maps, poor intelligence, and a dangerously fragmented battle plan. His forces were divided into 4 separate columns that were meant to advance in coordination but became separated in the rugged mountain terrain during the night march. On the morning of March 1, 1896, the Ethiopian forces under Menelik launched a devastating and coordinated assault. The Italian columns, isolated from one another and unable to provide mutual support, were overwhelmed one by one. The battle lasted only a few hours, but the result was catastrophic for Italy. Approximately 6,000 Italian soldiers were killed, nearly 2,000 were captured, and around 4,000 Eritrean askari soldiers lost their lives. It was the single greatest defeat of a European colonial army by an African force in the entire history of the Scramble for Africa. The aftermath of Adwa reverberated far beyond the borders of Ethiopia. Italy was forced to sign the Treaty of Addis Ababa in October 1896, officially recognizing Ethiopian sovereignty and independence. Ethiopia stood as proof that African nations could resist and defeat European colonialism through unity, strategy, and determination. The victory inspired generations of African and African diaspora leaders, from the Pan-African movements of the early 20th century to independence fighters across the continent decades later. Adwa became a symbol of dignity, resistance, and the possibility of freedom. It challenged the racist assumptions that underpinned colonialism and demonstrated that military superiority was not the exclusive domain of European powers. Today, March 1st is celebrated in Ethiopia as Victory of Adwa Day, a national holiday honoring those who fought and died to keep their nation free. The battle remains one of the most extraordinary military upsets in modern history, and its meaning continues to grow with every generation that learns its story.